You are listening to the QSR Web Podcast.
Brave, awesome cooks, fast and fearless in the face of overwhelming odds. Those are just a few of the things firefighters are known for. And in the case of the two former firefighters behind Firehouse Subs, it turns out those are also apparently darn good qualifications for building a great sub chain. I'm QSR web editor and podcast host Shelley Whitehead. And when we come back, we'll sit down with Firehouse Subs CEO Don Fox, who will talk to us about reimagining the brand stores at 25 years in and what the path forward looks like. And that's in just a few seconds.
The Interactive Customer Experience Association's mission is to connect B2C brands to technology that elevates the customer experience. Brands have access to resources, project help, news, and insights based around boosting their customer experience. Suppliers gain network opportunities to reach these brands and help them provide solutions to elevate their customer experience. Join today at icxa.org.
Anyone who's ever been to a Firehouse Subs location around mealtime knows they can be pretty bustling hives of activity. Heck, I once spent part of a lunch hour totally enthralled by the sub-filling grill mastery of one of its Indiana store employees. But then, like the firefighter brothers who founded the chain 25 years ago, hustling like your hair's on fire is all part of the game. And that surely lent itself to the QSR's success in an industry that moves at lightning speed. But then so has the brand's ability to quickly adapt, as we're hopefully going to hear more about as we talk to Firehouse Subs CEO Don Fox here today on the podcast. And welcome, Don.
Thanks, Shelley. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, likewise. So let's just start on that topic of change at the brand then, because there's a lot going on at Firehouse now to adapt and thrive in this increasingly delivery-centered business through the brand's new prototype, which we'll get to very shortly. But first, can you kind of give us a freeze frame of the chain at the moment, including things like locations and sales and even your geographic reach right now?
Sure. We are currently a system of 1,178 restaurants, the vast majority in the United States. We have 30 restaurants in Canada. That's a newer story for us over the past 3 years, and the brand's doing great up there. But we're in 45 states in the U.S., plus Puerto Rico. And we are primarily franchised. We do have 38 company restaurants. Almost all of those are located in Northeast Florida, which is where our headquarters is at, and where Firehouse was founded back in 1994. But franchising has been the main vehicle for growth for going on 20 years of our history. So a little bit more concentration in the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic, but increasing presence out west. Phoenix is one of our largest markets now. What we would call our central region has grown nicely. Probably the least penetrated part of the country is up in the upper portions of the Northeast.
I can see why. No offense, Northeast. But he's in Jacksonville. That's what we all have to remember right about now.
Yes, we enjoy that great year-round weather for business. Yes, it's terrific.
So while the system is strong, it's also being swayed equally strongly by the market forces that are affecting every QSR brand, namely fewer in-store customers, much more delivery and catering, and that kind of leads to the brand's new design prototype. Can you tell us what the major focus is of that initiative and what the initial customer response has been like at the locations where you have transformed?
Certainly. Well, we had a few key objectives going into the redesign, and not necessarily in this order of ranking or importance, but one was that our legacy design, which is been relatively unchanged for our entire 25-year history, is a little bit counterintuitive, no pun intended there. People have a hard time navigating the counter and figuring out exactly where to order. Some of our major competitors have a different type of queuing system. Ours is counter to that. In our system, you pay first, so you're queued up in line waiting to pay an order, and so that's not a natural flow to a lot of folks when they come in upon their first exposure to Firehouse. So we wanted to make it the whole queuing and ordering process more intuitive for people as they came in. Because while we are getting into some thinner air with over 1,000 restaurants, we still have a heck of a lot of development to do. So we're very conscious of those first reactions that customers have when they come in. Another thing we wanted to solve for is speed of service. We get very high marks for speed of service within the restaurant industry through various consumer work that is done. But those are high marks relative to guest expectations when they come into our brand. Empirically, we're not fast food. Our service standard is 4 to 6 minutes from the time someone orders until they get their food. It takes 2 minutes and 45 seconds to heat the meat and cheese that goes on the sandwich. So those are things that are not typical of not only QSR restaurants, but I'd say even fast casual restaurants. So we have an opportunity for the purposes of enhancing the overall experience and for increasing throughput as well to try to get those times down. So we've addressed that in some elements of the prototype, and that has to do with the back of the house, the kitchen setup. Another thing we wanted to do is to better position ourselves to deal with the shrinkage in the dining room presence. A lot of people talk about growth of delivery services. Even in your intro, you mentioned delivery. The way I like to characterize what's going on in the industry, it's really about the decline in dine-in. That's the underlying issue, because the industry is not growing in terms of traffic. Certainly, the industry has been plagued by that. So it's all a shift. And so the underlying story may seem like semantics on one end, but it's really not. It's about the decline in dine-in and the customer shifting those occasions to various forms of off-premise, not just delivery. In fact, the shift to off-premise in other areas outside of delivery is greater. I think in most brands' case, certainly is in ours. So we have to be able to have the optimum experience when it comes to not just dealing with the delivery orders, but also online order pickup. We have a program called Rapid Rescue to Go. Not terribly complicated to execute, really. It's a matter of, as some other brands are now doing too, having a place where the order is stationed for customers to come and pick it up. So we've woven all that into the design. And last but not least, in the prototype, we've downsized the facility because with the declines in dine-in business, it does allow us to pick up some economy in the restaurant, reduce rent by virtue of getting the footprint down, reducing the number of seats, and that is serving us well so far. We only have one of the units open so far. We opened back in July here in Jacksonville, and we're in the very latter stages now of doing the consumer research, some validation work, and we'll have that wrapped up by early to mid-January at the latest, and then make our decisions on how we move forward with it in the system. Very encouraging what we're seeing so far.
Very encouraging. So customers are liking it. They are getting through the experience of whether that be takeout or dine in. They're enjoying it.
Yes, well, it's definitely ringing the cash register. So the sales performance of the restaurant is terrific. It's performing currently at a level that's about 60 to 65% higher than our average restaurant in the system.
Wow.
So that's terrific. And that's part of the consumer work you then have to do to figure out exactly what's contributing to that. It's probably a number of things, but it's very encouraging to see that type of sales level. And one thing that we didn't expect to see is that our use of the dining room has actually increased as a percentage of sales. Now, we did take the opportunity with redesign to change some things in terms of the ambiance. And we always had very high ratings. Sometimes not unusual to be best in class in terms of the decor or the image. of our restaurants. It pays homage to firefighters and first responders. I think we've always done a very good job with that. But one of the things that we realized over time too is that our decor and marketing materials produce a lot of clutter in the restaurant. We saw in our research that there were a lot of messages and cues that the customer really wasn't seeing. We weren't getting credit for it. So we took this redesign as an opportunity to streamline some things, to skew the dining room even to more of a fast casual feel as opposed to QSR. We had some elements of both. I think it's fair to say in the older design.
Yeah.
And we have, and I to be candid, I wasn't expecting it. We have larger usage of the dining room. In our system, we're doing about 38% of our business in the dining room. This prototype's running closer to 45% on a very high base of sales. So, of course, we downsized the dining room too. So one of the most frequent anecdotal comments we get from customers is, "Why'd you make the dining room so small?" and we want to say, well, that's a long story.
You people are hard to figure out.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, it would be a blessing if it turned out that those image enhancements and so on, that they were contributing to increased usage. We prefer that that's the way the industry goes, and I think I could speak for just about every operator out there that would love to have more people in their dining room. It's critical in many respects for us, even though we've made significant improvements in our packaging and enhancing our off-premise experience. No matter what we do, the on-premise experience is always going to be better in terms of quality and presentation of the food. When someone dines in, we don't wrap it in fast food packaging. We serve it plated in a basket that's lined. So great presentation. Again, something we get very high marks for. Something that none of our competitors do. When people dine in, their inclination to buy beverages is significantly higher than on a takeout transaction. So that has a fundamental impact on profitability. So I would love to see a reversal in consumer trend to more people dining in. Again, we didn't design with that as a goal. And again, this is just one restaurant, but it is interesting to note that we're having greater success on that count. So again, we have to take stock of it and can't rule anything out at this point in terms of how we move forward. We might even possibly come out of it saying, well, maybe we should bump our dining room size up a little bit more if this gives us some type of sustained advantage in the mix between on-premise and off-premise.
Isn't that interesting? But still, this is all a lot of cost and effort, and it's part of kind of that constant goal of staying out in front of the pack in this sector. So I'm wondering, can you give us an idea of how you see the current overall competitiveness of the sub sandwich category now, say, versus 10 or 20 years ago, and how Firehouse is positioning itself? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you go back in time, I mean, really far back, and let's say 15 years, you had three national competitors. You had Subway, you had Quiznos. Quiznos was really on their way up, but they eventually became the second national sandwich brand. And Blimpie perhaps had been there, but was already declining. So, of course, Quiznos' ills are well documented. I don't need to repeat them, but they've contracted tremendously by orders of magnitude. Subway, for many years, of course, continued to grow, getting well past the 25,000 mark in units. But during all that period of time, up until really about 3 years ago, you had Jimmy John's, Jersey Mike's, and Firehouse emerging as the other national players. So with Quiznos' decline, that's what we're left with today. But the big change in dynamic the last 3 years, of course, is the erosion of Subway's store base. Having over 1,000 restaurants, net loss in units last year. I haven't heard a projection for this year. Wouldn't surprise me if it's another 1,000 units. But going south, and their loss in units over 2,000, at least from 2016 to 2018 in the U.S., they had a decline of well over 2,000 units, and that's led to overall contraction in the sandwich category. There are actually, at the end of 2018, there were more than 1,000 units less in our segment than there had been 3 years prior. So very counter to what the industry is seeing overall, which is still even though the restaurant industry is so mature, there still continues to be increased per capita presence of restaurants, but not so in the sandwich category. So that might lead one to immediately say, well, it's a less competitive environment than it was. I don't hold that belief, because the fact is that to some degree, the loss of Subways have created a vacuum that has been filled, not completely filled, because there's still, again, you've had more than 1,000 units less in the category. But to the degree that part of that Subway vacuum has been filled, it's been filled with much stronger competitors, including us. But I'll give Jersey Mike's their due. Jimmy John's are formidable competitors. There are a number of regional competitors that are all more formidable in the sense that their food quality, in particular, to every brand, is demonstrably better than Subway. So we may be competing against less units in the category, but we are competing against stronger players, and now over a very broad national footprint. So interesting times for the segment, for sure.
It really is, and it's great to have kind of the way that you framed it, because it puts a new light on things. It's kind of it seems like the category is getting a little more high end. Is that maybe part of it?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the brands that have continued to grow in the category and have been successful in growing their units, growing their average unit volume, having higher quality product is a common denominator. So as brands have chipped away at the sandwich category, I think it could be said with confidence, to a great degree, at Subway's expense. The consumers that are being peeled away are those that have a deeper appreciation for those type of qualities, food quality in particular, but also sometimes for convenience. Jimmy John's famously has centered their brand on delivery, and they get good marks with the consumer for that. Of course, they're not doing third-party delivery; they've eschewed that, but they're staying focused on their own delivery methodology. And in many respects, again, I think it could be fairly said, they've become more convenient than Subway, even though Subway is so ubiquitous in locations. And that's where Subway gains its convenience ratings, by the virtue of the fact that there's one on, it seems like every corner sometimes, but again, so ubiquitous that's how they gain the convenience ratings that they do. But so every competitor has gone in and find ways to be better at different parts of the business. Certainly with Firehouse, our food quality is our absolute strength. But then we've got one other really key asset to our brand, which is what we do in the community through our Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation and commitment to community and supporting first responders. We've now crossed the $46 million mark on equipment that's been donated to first responders all across the country and internationally. We have a separate foundation actually now that is servicing the needs of our Canadian markets. So that really sets us apart, and we get a lot of credit from the consumer for the work that we do there. And of course, our consumer gets great credit for it, because our customers are the folks that contribute the majority of the funds that come into the foundation, about 65 to 70%.
Well, it's an increasingly important part of the business, or at least it seems to be becoming that way. But so is catering. Can you give us a kind of a snapshot of catering for Firehouse?
Certainly. Catering for our system is a little bit uneven. We have on the high end restaurants that will do as much as 30% of their sales in catering, and that is really a credit to the operators in those markets who go out and just hit the streets, business to business, B2C, really drumming up catering business, establishing those relationships, establishing a great track record for servicing those accounts, because having consistent professional service on your catering is such an important ingredient for holding that business and getting repeat usage, especially in a B2B environment. Our average in the system, though, by contrast, is 5% of sales. So it just shows how much room there is to continue to grow that piece of the business. And we've been very focused on it for a number of years, but it's also a space that over the course of the past, I'd say 10, even 12 years, has become much more crowded. I go back 10 years ago, and it was rare to see a restaurant brand, especially if you're in the QSR or fast casual space, that was doing any advertising of catering. And by advertising, I don't even mean through media or so on, just in restaurant, point of purchase materials and so on to promote catering. So it was, when we started getting involved in it, it really was virgin territory, but now it's a very busy space with virtually every brand having some form of a catering program. So the real key is, I think, having you always have to have a great product. It has to be positioned for price well, because especially in a business-to-business environment, so many of your clients are working within budget parameters that you need to find a way to fit into. And then that service element, really being dependable. Usually when you're doing catering business to business, there's a gatekeeper for that business, a key person. Maybe it's a executive assistant, administrative assistant, office manager, somebody who's responsible for that. And the last thing you want to do is make that person's life difficult by having an order that shows up late or incomplete, and they will move on from you so quickly because in some respects, you perhaps have even tarnished their reputation for being able to put on a good event. So service is premium for building your catering business.
It's interesting. It seems like we spend more and more time at work, and so more and more need to call food to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hence of course, hence the emergence of the third-party delivery services. Just for not that service can be used for catering as well, but of course, most of that growth is of the third-party delivery services is coming on the more on the. I wouldn't categorize it as catering. Normal menu items being delivered by the DoorDashes and Grubhubs and Uber Eats of the world. So that's quite a tumultuous arena right now, and even of course based on the news about Grubhub just from yesterday, and the hit that their stock took in the wake of recent earnings reports, and so yeah. Very constantly moving, and I would say even volatile space. It's been in constant transition for the last 3 to 4 years. Has not stopped moving, has not stabilized it in virtually any sense. And I think the rate of change in that sector is accelerating almost by the month. Much of what I've been predicting would happen in the space is coming true. If I look back over the last year or two, the way I've talked about it, but the only thing I'm surprised at is the pace of these things coming about is even faster than I had been predicting. So
that's interesting, because it kind of leads into, and this question is for fun, but I can't wait to hear how you answer this. And that is, can you tell us? I don't know, Don, have you had past firefighting experience? I
have not. So,
okay, but you're good. You're getting it by osmosis.
Yes, I'll tell you this. I know a heck of a lot more about firefighting and first responders than I knew 16 years ago.
So my question to you is, tell us the best lesson you personally learned in your leadership at Firehouse that might suggest how the restaurant business can be a little like firefighting.
I think that probably the most important lesson I could draw on is teamwork and training. When first responders we'll stay focused on firefighting since you use that segment for the analogy. For firefighters to go in and effectively do their job, they need a superb level of training, obviously fitness to do it, but working as a team, and where everything becomes intuitive. How they, I mean, it's ingrained. If it's not intuitive, they've been trained, but it feels that way. It's so ingrained they don't have to think twice. And the operational side of the restaurant industry is very much the same way, especially when you get down into the unit level. So much is about execution and teamwork, and being able to work well together. And training is at the root of that. Training is what creates an environment and a capacity and an ability to be able to execute flawlessly. So I think that's the main lesson that transfers over. And I think that if I go back, take a step back to the headquarters environment, of course, what we have to do here is to create an environment for our restaurant operators where we're giving them the tools, the training, the inspiration sometimes to be able to execute at those very high levels and put out the fires, if you will.
What a great answer. I thank you so much, Don. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you today, as it has been for you, our audience, to listen to the podcast today for us. And just a note, if you're a QSR with a story to tell, shoot me an email at editor@qsrweb.com. I'm always looking for great QSR executives like Don to come and share your brand stories. Until then, until the next time, thanks for listening and have a great day, everybody.